Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are back for another Bible story reading. We have been going through the story of Queen Esther in the book of Esther, and we are at an exciting part of the story. I want to welcome everybody here. If you are new, what we do is we go through the stories of the Bible. We just read the stories of the Bible for people who don't know what they are. Maybe you've only heard bits and pieces, or you think you know what they are. Perhaps you only know what somebody's told you about them, or you have forgotten them. Well, we go through them so that you have a chance to know what they say, and if they come up in conversation, you can speak about them intelligently. We go live on Facebook, and then we upload to YouTube later. So if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. Please hit the like and subscribe button. But like I said, we've been going through the story of Esther. We are now at chapter 7 in Esther. To kind of recap everything that has happened, Esther has been made queen after the old queen got the boot, and her cousin Mordecai has raised her. And Mordecai has advised her not to let anybody know what her ethnicity is. She is a Jewish girl. Then Mordecai overheard some eunuchs plotting to kill the king after Esther became queen. And because of that, Esther was able to get word to the king that this was going on, and it spared the king's life. Now, another man that works for the king, who is his right-hand man, Haman, is all full of pride and puffed up, thinking he's on equal playing field as the king. But he hates the Jews and has made this law to have all of the Jews slaughtered on this particular day. Women, children, men, didn't matter. He wanted all of the Jews extinct on this particular day. But because Esther is the queen, she has devised this plan where she holds this little banquet to lure the king and Haman into the same room and then plead for the life of her people. She's going to reveal her ethnicity now to the king and plead for the life of her people, because the king has promised to give her whatever she wants, all the way up to half the kingdom if that's what she so chooses. So let's start with chapter 7. The king and Haman came to feast with Esther, the queen. Once again, on the second day, while drinking wine, the king asked Esther, "Queen Esther, whatever you ask will be given to you, whatever you seek, even to half the kingdom will be done for you." Queen Esther answered, "If I have found favor in your eyes, your majesty, and if the king is pleased, spare my life. This is my request. And spare my people. This is my desire. For my people and I have been sold to destruction, death, and extermination. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept silent indeed. The trouble wouldn't be worth burdening the king." The king Ahasuerus spoke up and asked Queen Esther, "Who is this, and where is the one who would devise such a scheme?" Esther answered, "The adversary and enemy is this evil Haman." Haman stood terrified before the king and queen. The king arose in anger and went from where they were drinking wine to the palace garden. Haman remained to beg Queen Esther for his life because he realized the king was planning something terrible for him. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Would he actually violate the queen while I am in the house?" As soon as the statement left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Harbona, one of the king's eunuchs, said, "There is a gallows 70 feet tall at Haman's house that he made for Mordecai, who gave the report that saved the king." The king said, "Hang him on it." They hanged Haman on the gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's anger subsided. We're going to move on to chapter 8. That same day, King Ahasuerus awarded Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. Mordecai entered the king's presence because Esther had revealed her relationship to Mordecai. The king removed his signet ring he had recovered from Haman and gave it to Mordecai, and Esther put him in charge of Haman's estate. Then Esther addressed the king again. She fell at his feet, wept, and begged him to revoke the evil of Haman the Agagite and his plot he has devised against the Jews. The king extended the golden scepter toward Esther, so she got up and stood before the king. She said, "If it pleases the king and I have found favor before him, if the matter seems right to the king and I am pleasing in his eyes, let a royal edict be written. Let it revoke the documents the scheming Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. For how could I bear to see the disaster that would come on my people? How could I bear to see the destruction of my relatives?" King Ahasuerus said to Esther the queen and to Mordecai the Jew, "Look, I have given Haman's estate to Esther, and he was hanged on the gallows because he attacked the Jews. Write in the king's name whatever pleases you concerning the Jews, and seal it with a royal signet ring. A document written in the king's name and sealed with the royal signet ring cannot be revoked." On the 23rd day of the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, the royal scribes were summoned. Everything was written as Mordecai commanded for the Jews, to the satraps, the governors, and the officials of the 127 provinces from India to Cush. The edict was written for each province in its own script, for each ethnic group in its own language, and to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in King Ahasuerus' name and sealed the edicts with the royal signet ring. He sent the document by mounted couriers who rode fast horses bred in the royal stables. The king's edict gave the Jews in each and every city the right to assemble and defend themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate every ethnic and provincial army hostile to them, including women and children, and to take their possessions as spoils of war. This would take place on a single day throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month Adar. A copy of the text issued as law throughout every province was distributed to all the people, so the Jews could be ready to avenge themselves against their enemies on that day. The couriers rode out in haste on their royal horses at the king's urgent command. The law was also issued in the fortress of Susa. Mordecai went from the king's presence clothed in royal purple and white, with a great gold crown and a purple robe of fine linen. The city of Susa shouted and rejoiced, and the Jews celebrated with the gladness, joy, and honor. In every province and every city, wherever the king's command and his law reached, joy and rejoicing took place among the Jews. There was a celebration and a holiday, and many of the ethnic groups of the land professed themselves to be Jews because fear of the Jews had overcome them. That's the end of chapter 8. Well, let's go ahead and recap this. There are 3 ways that we look at Scripture. 1, what does it say? We have to have reading comprehension. We have to read it. If you don't read it, you don't know what it says. 2, we have to take everything into context. What was it saying to the people of the time? What was going on? We have to understand the history and why it was written and how and to whom it was written. And last but not least, what, if anything, is this saying to us today? Well, remember, Haman had sent out this law because he hated the Jews, and he had intended to have them all killed. So he sent this law out saying that on this particular day, everybody that came across a Jew was to kill them. Well, that was very disturbing to Mordecai and Esther, who knew that their people were going to be killed, and it would have included her as well had she been found out to be a Jew. So now she had set up this banquet and had just Haman come. Remember, Haman thought he was somebody special because the queen had invited just him and the king to this banquet, this little lunch and get together. Well, things don't work out so well for Haman. He had thought that he was in the king's favor and anything he wanted he could have, but the tables turned and everything started turning towards the favor of Mordecai from the king. Now they are at this banquet. They're drinking. It's the second time they've been in a banquet. They're drinking their wine, and once again the king looks at Esther and he says, "What do you want? What can I give you? I'll give you whatever you want, all the way to half the kingdom." And Esther says to him, "Your Majesty, and if the king is pleased, spare my life. This is my request. And spare my people. This is my desire." So she didn't ask for riches. She didn't ask for gold. She did not ask for position. She asked for her life and the life of her people, her ancestors, her relatives, her family, to be spared from this law that Haman had written. And the king says, "Well, who did this? Who planned to kill your people?" And she says, "The very man that's in this room with us, Haman." Well, now the king is furious. And she explains to him that this is the guy who set out to kill all of her people, including her. Well, the king's mad now that Haman had the audacity to do that. And so he plans to have Haman killed instead. So this turns on Haman. This luncheon goes south really fast for Haman. And Haman had set up these gallows that he had intended to hang Mordecai on, but Mordecai didn't get hanged on there because the king decided to honor Mordecai for saving his life. So instead, the king has it ordered for Haman to be hung on the very gallows that he had set up to kill Mordecai with. But when the king comes in to have him taken away, he sees that Haman has thrown himself on Queen Esther and assumes that he's trying to violate his very queen right in his presence. And so that's the end of that. He's like, "Hang the guy. We're done with him." And he gives Queen Esther Haman's estate, and Queen Esther makes Mordecai the head of that estate. And then Esther begs the king. She says, "Please, we have to do something basically about this law that Haman put into place that's going to kill all my people. Please make another law, an edict, a law that says that the Jews can defend themselves, that they don't have to just be killed. If Haman had just wanted to make them slaves, I would have kept my mouth shut because I wouldn't have taken their very lives. But he wanted to take their very lives. So please, can you do something about this?" So he gives Mordecai his signet ring, and he allows Mordecai to write this law that says that on that day that the Jews are supposed to be killed, they all have the right to defend themselves, and this is now an act of war. They can defend themselves, including against women and children. Well, the people find out now. The Jews are rejoicing. Thank God we are not going to be slaughtered after all. This is not going to be a genocide against our people. And they are rejoicing. They're glad. They're excited. Well, when everybody finds out that, these Jews can defend themselves, they get scared. And some of them even pretend to be Jews themselves. In other words, they want to be on the winning side. They know that if they're on this other side, it's not going to go well for them. You see, God had made a promise to Abraham way back in Genesis. He made promises to Abraham. He made promises to Abraham's descendants. He said he would always spare a remnant of his chosen people. And the Jews were his chosen people. That's who he made this covenant with. It's not that he doesn't love other people. He loves other people too. But he had made a special covenant. So think about if you are married to somebody. You've entered into a covenant agreement with that person. You and that person have a very special relationship. Doesn't mean that you don't have or cannot have a relationship with other people, but you're going to do whatever you can to make sure that you protect and honor the relationship that you have entered into with your spouse. Well, that's what God has done. He's entered into a relationship with these Jewish people. And so he honors that promise. God is not a God that can lie. He cannot lie. He does what he says. He says what he means, and he always follows through and keeps his promises. And so we see here that he is keeping his promise once again to keep his Jewish people that he is in a relationship, a covenant relationship with, to keep them safe. Even during times we can read through scripture when they break the covenant they have with their God. Even when they break the covenant, he still loves them. And he loved them so much that he knew that this was going to happen. So he made Esther queen. Remember that little saying that we talked about? For such a time as this. She was remarkably made queen out of over 100 virgins that the king could have chosen, but he chose her, a Jewish girl, he chose, so that when the time was right, she could be the one to make sure that her people were spared. God ordained that. God set all of that up. So I hope you're learning something. We have more to come for the story of Esther, and we will, let's see how many chapters we have. 2 chapters left. And we will probably just go ahead and finish that up next time we are together. But I hope you're learning something. I hope you got something out of this. Have a wonderful day, and God bless.